you say, why don't we do this studio? And he says, I already got the studio book. And then you say, okay, but we'll use my engineer. He says, I already got the engineer.
Did you hear this from Keith, right?
I know everything. So you say, well, I'll pull in some players. And he goes, I already got the band. I just want you to show up and do what you do. Is that what happened?
You've got it 100% correct.
Wait, so I want to ask you about this early session that you did with Keith Urban, the first session you ever did with Keith Urban.
Okay.
I've heard interviews where he was trying to put you through the ringer. I don't think he wanted to work with you in his first sessions.
No, he didn't.
He didn't, right? So he says, you say, okay, where are we going to do this? I'll pick a studio.
How'd you find this information?
I know everything.
Okay, good.
Okay.
I accept that.
So he says, you say, why don't we do this studio? And he says, I already got the studio booked. And then you say, okay, but we'll use my engineer. He says, I already got the engineer. And then he says,
did you hear this from Keith, right?
I know everything. So he says, so you say, well, I'll pull in some players. And he goes, I already got the band. I just want you to show up and do what you do. Is that what happened?
You've got it 100% correct. He didn't want to work with me because I think he heard some of the records that I had done previous to that.
Yeah.
They were hit records. I mean, and I'm not going to mention the records. You know, music is subjective, and we all think stuff is the greatest, and the rest of it's shit, right?
You didn't think he was a great guitar player the first time you heard him. Am I wrong about that? Or
no, you're not wrong. You know everything, and this is scary. Now all of a sudden, it's like this is morning time, so I'm going to have to need to drink a little more of this. I didn't think he was a bad guitar player.
Yeah.
I listened to some of this stuff, and contextually where I was coming from, the currency of guitar playing that I was used to. I mean, all that stuff. And I heard this.
What were you listening to? Like The Ranch? Is that the record that you were listening to? Or
probably
his first early solo records?
Probably a little both.
Yeah.
I mean, so and let me be a little more exact. No, he was really good.
Yeah, of course.
But I mean, who I was used to listening to and who I was used to playing with when I was in my 20s on the West Coast, the word great, that's a tough one to, live up to for anybody. And so, everybody, it's a natural thing. It's great. God, this guy's great. Well, contextualized, when you see Keith play live, because that's what I did pretty close to around that time. I want to see what great was. Well, when I was hearing on records, wasn't living up to that. It didn't sound great to me. The playing was wonderful. I mean, but it didn't make a mark on me like the stuff that I was listening to. When I saw him live, there was a different experience because it was like a hurricane. You couldn't divorce it from the physicality and his passion. I mean, everything. He was a whirling dervish. I got it then. Made sense. But the head of the record label thought that I could help him connect those dots. That made sense, and I could. But getting back to your story, it was basically a big audition, and he was, he admitted this to me. He's told it. Maybe you've heard him speak this story, but he was a bit skeptical, and it was like, this guy. Let's. I don't think he was trying to shame me, but it was definitely. I'm gonna dispel any myth about this. Producer. He had some bad experiences with producers, right. And I've learned all this through the years, and our friendship has gone over 20 years and whatnot. But that was it, and so it was a convergence of quite a few things. The band was phenomenal. Tom Bukovac was the guitar player in the band. There you go. Chris McHugh, Jimmy Lee Sloas, Tim Akers, who died a couple years ago, was playing B3. Band Justin Niebank was the engineer. It was teed up, and it wasn't my go-to section at that point. But I accepted the invitation and the challenge. I suspect the one caveat that I think it's luck, maybe a little intuition. He said you can pick the song. From a list of songs, and the one that I most related to was a song called "Somebody Like You," which is a little bit more of a rock song. He wrote it with John Shanks. West Coast makes sense now, and so that was it. And I remember I took my Matchless amp and my Gretsch guitar because I was playing a Gretsch then. I don't know why, that just was kind of my thing. And we went in there, and it's like it's a convergence of a lot of things you can't control, but I had a lot of experience, and all of that just kind of came together in a way that produced this mega hit. I was a part of it, right? But when something like that happens, it's hard to decipher what is what. So I was immediately, Keith was intrigued, to say the least, and that's where we started rolling from that point.
He said that you came in and the whole session just elevated and that you instantly started arranging, which I guess is the only thing you can do in that circumstance, right?
Yeah.
So were you listening, when you're listening to the drums and you're saying that would fit the melody better here? Like, how do you know what to do in that circumstance? I mean, because you've done it for a million years.
Well,
but
you just, it's just experience. I mean, I played on, everything, prior to that led to kind of that moment, right? So it wasn't like I had an agenda and I didn't know what was going to happen. But I suppose, maybe that's part of another discussion of why I ended up saying I want to try producing. I didn't grow up wanting to produce records. I didn't care about that. But the experience of being around all the people that I had been around prior to that, the situations, it just seemed like a natural thing. And that's probably why the person that was probably the most influential at me trying to be a producer, he probably spotted that part of my skill set. It affected the way I played guitar. And this is another part of it. I think I've said this before, but it's very true. It's not being humble or anything like that. I always thought that I was way overrated as a guitar player.
Really?
100%. Because when I was sitting in chairs in my 20s, living my dream, I was sitting with some of who I think are the greatest guitar players. They affected me, and I suppose I had to have a bit of ego and arrogance to feel like I should be there because I was invited. So I got that. But the other side, split screen, is everything that everybody else did always sounded unattainable for me. So I guess the net effect is, you get better because of the people that you're around, but never felt like I was that level. Like I would sit with Mike Landau for sessions after session, and I just, oh, God, I'm not as good as this guy. But I think the arranger in me provided a path. I had skills. It wasn't like I couldn't play. I could play the guitar, but I think knowing what to play is also one of those kind of secret sauces that when people when they are exposed to that and when it helps them out, boy, that just jumpstarts your career. So I took that into production, and again, I got the master's class when I was in my 20s, getting to work with these world-class producers, and you're just glomming this information by being present, right? So it all works out. It's a long answer. It just everything kind of happens, and you use your natural abilities, and also I put my 10,000 hours in.
Yeah.